Hello, welcome back from the Nonviolence in Myanmar talk series. This is Htet from Freedom Fighter Myanmar. Together with me today is Yeshua from Nonviolence International. Hello, Yeshua. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. How are you, Yeshua?
I'm well and a bit tired because of my last week trip to Philippines, but yeah, I'm good now. Um, Today, we are thinking to talk about negotiations, especially on the perspective of nonviolent activisms and movements. Um, Before diving in, I'd like to give a brief reflections of how my perspective on negotiation changed from the early days to right now. So yeah, I started learning about nonviolence movements only after the coup. So at the time, I was reading books about nonviolence movement, especially written by Gene Sharp. So there's a book called From Dictatorship to Democracy. So I think in the early chapter, he mentioned about negotiation. And in there, he's quite skeptical about negotiation. He say like we cannot trust the promise of the regime or military or something, and um, and then only the resistant side has more power than the change will come. So like he say like we should not rely on negotiation. Something like that. That's what I understand. So in the early days, and also I think that's kind of resonate with what a lot of people are thinking at the time. A lot of the youths and strike committees and protest people like student activists, they feel like the resistance movement in the 1988 uprising led by NLD and student movement at the time, they didn't make the complete change because they focus on negotiation. So like this is a general idea. So like at the time from there, people thinking like negotiation is a trap. Like it is like we are giving the military to lead the pathway, and we have no say. If the military even broke the promises, we cannot do anything. So that's what people fear, and we cannot trust military. So this is the narrative that repeatedly towing this 5 or 6 years over time. So like yeah, so but gradually when I learn more and more about nonviolence movement, I see like I feel a bit different. I see a different view because like nonviolence movement, whether it is about protest or strike, it is all about actually, what I understand is like to communicate the other side. So we got to talk with the other side, like dialogue or negotiation at some point, or maybe consistently we are trying to give some message to them, like there's a better way that we can do better together, something like that. There's a different ways of doing things, something. So like yeah, this is quite a different approach that I see gradually. But still, yeah, it's also challenging to see how that really work because like right now the polarization is quite huge, that the civil war is prominent, and also people really think like even from the military side or the resistance side thinking like that like we cannot talk each other. So this is even though the resistance side is now very tired, people are really tired and running out of resources, but still people think negotiation cannot make a real change. So this is the current, I think, situations in Myanmar. So what do you say?
Well, let's take a real world example right now. The situation in Iran, between Iran and the United States and Israel. Do you think either side trusts one another?
No?
No, but they're talking.
Yeah.
They're talking. And one of the reasons they're talking is because neither side sees victory as a near term solution. I would agree with that assessment. Um, and this is generally the reason why people start talking in armed conflict. It's not because they trust one another. It's because they don't see a military victory on the horizon. They just see a long, protracted conflict, and maybe they can win the war through dialogue rather than through weapons. This is usually the approach that either side takes, or the many sides is in some cases. Um, there are two ways that wars end. One, one side gets completely exterminated. This is rarely the case. The other way is through dialogue. So these are two ways that wars end. And most of them end through some type of negotiation. And it's not because the two sides woke up and say, hey, I'm tired of all this violence. Why don't we try the peace way? No, never happened. Never happened. It's because there is a huge cost to armed conflict, and they don't know if they can sustain it. Both sides just see protracted, no victory on the horizon and protracted armed conflict. And this is usually the reason why combatant parties begin a dialogue. Not because they trust the other side, it's because they are tired and they don't see victory coming anytime soon through armed violence. So I totally understand people say, oh, we don't trust the military. Of course they don't trust the military. There's really good reasons for them not to trust the military. If you take a military mindset, if they believe their own propaganda, like some of them do, there's no reason for them to trust anybody else either. So that's going to be the foundation point of a negotiation. And each side is going to want to try and have advantage on their side. This is natural and it's normal. This is not to talk. This is just the way that it is.
Yeah, so what I understand is like you say it is not trust, it is the reality that the different parties come into the table, negotiation table. But let's talk about the military side right now. So like, and then what I see is like military feel like they are really empowered right now, empowered by Russia, empowered by China right now. Myanmar is meeting with Xi Jinping, and then they get really great support also from India. So they think like they can minimize the threat to them. Because for them, the existence of armed groups actually empower their power. They don't need to eliminate all. Like they have been coexisting together with different armed groups. So like the military don't have incentive to have a meaningful negotiation than some kinds of power sharing as before, like between elites. So this is kind of like, different from like Iran's and America negotiation. Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that. Feel comfortable. Why do you feel comfortable? The military chief, now president, prime minister, what do they call him?
President.
He went to India. He went to China. He didn't hold a gun to the people in India. He didn't hold a gun to the people in China. He went there to talk, and because he could be seen having a dialogue, he got some level of legitimacy. Now, legitimacy is a type of power, but it's not a power that's dependent on weapons. So there are many types of power that don't necessarily rely on weapons. Moral legitimacy. There's one person in Myanmar that has moral legitimacy in spades, and that would, of course, be Aung San Suu Kyi. She has a certain type of power. All of these are types of powers that come into play when people start to have dialogue.
I know you have lots of experience about Myanmar also, and also working with other countries. Yeah, I also understand that the military leader want legitimacy. That's why he always say like he wants negotiation, he wants dialogue, he is offering peace to everyone. So that's what the Napier narrative is. Even though the resistance side say like we don't trust and we don't negotiate, something like that. But now the resistance also changed a little bit. Like for example, like KIA, they try to say like we're not negotiate individually, but collectively we will negotiate. So this is a kind of a general theme here. But for military side, I feel like yeah, they say they want peace, but at the same time they are their military assaults are actually become stronger, especially in these days. They're opening many fronts. They're becoming more offensive these days. So like lots of people thinking like the military is using this the tactic like they will negotiate, but at the same time they will fight. They will use the military operation at the same time. So like I think that's kind of like the same approach before also. Like they will try to talk with the bilaterally with different armed groups and they will share some interests. So this kinds of negotiation to make certain forms of stability the country that you mentioned, India or China want. India or China didn't care about democracy in Myanmar or any other like sustainable peace or something. They just need stability. So like
Yeah.
that's a main concern from the like peace advocates in Myanmar. So yeah, please
Well,
add it on that based on your experience. Yeah.
if the opposition withholds its consent, then the military government doesn't get what it wants. I mean, it doesn't have to say, hey, we're open to peace dialogue. It doesn't have to say that. It's forced to say that. It's forced to say that because so much of the country is not under their control. It's not going to be under their control anytime in the near future. And they know that. And they want that. They need to have that. They need to have that to show stability to the external environment. They need to have a state of non-war in order to receive any kind of um, foreign investment because business wants stability. They want peace. If there's a chance their factories could get blown up or their working staff could be conscripted, they're not going to want to put money into the country. So that is one of the things that's driving the need for the military to have dialogue. So that's a card that's held by the people who are resisting the military, whether they're resisting by nonviolent means or violent means. This is a card that they hold. It's a really powerful one. You shouldn't underestimate that power. And the military is basically acknowledged that you have that power because they're coming saying, hey, come into peace dialogue. They're also trying to bully. They're saying, if you don't, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
And they can do that for a while. I mean, this wasn't any different than the types of bullying that Trump did. But now he's talking. He has to talk. So there is
Yeah.
power there. People have to realize that the military is actually acknowledging that power.
Yeah, I get the point that the it's not only the weapons and the military power, but also the political legitimacy and economic incentive. These are the driver for military to come into the table. So this is the general idea. Um, but let's talk from the
And it's a
resistance.
power that's in the hands of the opposition. That is a power that is in the hands of the opposition.
Yeah, okay. So let's talk about the opposition resistant actors. So from the resistance sides, like there's a prominent idea from the early days of 2021 movement is that like once they are bloodshot by the military crackdowns, so there was a comment saying that for the blood debts, there is none to negotiate. So this is a very strong idea, strong slogan. So some of the strike committee even use this as a motto of their organizations. And and because that slogan is quite prominent, the resistant oftentimes see negotiation as a betrayal to the resistance side. So it is not like what kinds of negotiation it makes, what kinds of results it make, people don't care. People think like if you go to the negotiation, if you just go to meet with me online or someone, then you are betrayal. We cannot trust you. This is, I think, common thinking of the resistance sides. Um, yeah, I feel like this rigidity, it's very easy to exploit from the military side, because the military know once some people come to the negotiation table, there will be division among the opposition sides. Military know clearly. So I think Yeah, I'm trying to criticize this view. Like it is not about whether we cannot see negotiation as a binary view, like lose or win, but rather like how to do negotiation is more important. I think that's what I advocated. But still, this is a quite prominent idea, even among a lot of activists, civil society groups, and resistance actors these days. So and one of their argument is like that, like as I mentioned before, like even in the for example in the case of Iran and US, as you mentioned, the Iran get the US to get the deal is because they have some power to control the Hormuz Straits. Um, and that power make US to withdraw, some of their military offensive operations. So but right now the of the resistance side you mentioned have certain power on legitimacy and economic sanctions and incentive. And and do you think this will be enough to make us a peace process for to make a deal with military? And
Well, it depends on the amount of unity there is in the opposition. Because the opposition needs to be unified. If they're not unified, it's going to be chaos, and it would have divisions, like you say. Some people say no, we won't talk. Some people say we will. With the idea of the blood debt, essentially you've put chains on yourself. Because now the only possibility is to continue armed struggle until there's no more blood left. If there's always this blood debt, then there can be no negotiation. And you've essentially put yourself into a future where fighting will continue until there's no more people left, there's no more blood to be shed. And because many people in Myanmar are Buddhist, they can go to the teaching of the Rohini conflict. You probably know that one, where two armies were going to go to war over a body of water, a river, the River Rohini. And the Buddha walked in between them and said, what is more on the earth? Is there more water or is there more blood? And they said, there's more water because there's very little blood. It's only within human bodies. And so the Buddha said, then you should be careful how you shed it. And of course, like all good Buddhist fables, they decided not to have a war at that point and share the water. But that idea of a blood debt really chains on the opposition. This way chains on the military. And the military could use the same argument for not talking. Or they could. So that has to be seen in that light. Is that useful in getting you where you want to go? If you've decided there's no need to negotiate and we will fight until the last person is alive, well, that's a decision that people could make. Now, quite a long time ago, the National Democratic Front was a coalition of armed resistance organizations in Myanmar. And the idea of negotiations came up. And at that time, I was the Southeast Asia representative of Nonviolence International. And they said, could you study for us on how peace processes work? And so we spent quite a bit of time doing a study, and we had 3 research questions in doing that study. We looked at many armed conflicts and that were resolved or in the process of being resolved in about 7 different countries. And our research questions were, is there an identifiable path along which all nations that we studied move from armed conflict to peace? Our second question was, have some of those armed conflicts done something brilliant and it should be duplicated in other situations? And the third was, is there something we're always doing in peace processes that we shouldn't do and we should avoid? And the answer to all three was yes. Yes, there is an identifiable path. And we found three very large themes of that path. Yes, there are things that have been brilliant in some armed conflicts and should be duplicated and learned from. And yes, there are things that we always do in peace processes that we should avoid. So from that, the broad path that we saw has three stages. The first one we called talking about talks. The second stage was balanced ceasefire. And the third stage was comprehensive peace accord. And these three follow in that order. And it is always possible to move through one stage, like talking about talks, to get to ceasefire, and things falling apart, and they move back to the first stage all over again. And one of the things in talking about talks, the first stage that has to be determined is who sits at the table, who gets to talk. And if you prohibit somebody from talking, sometimes it makes things more expedient if you have less people at the table. There's a cost in it. And are you aware of what that cost is? And so that's going to be the first decision to be made. We know on one side of the table who sits there, right? It's going to be the military and its allied groups. On the other side, who's going to be there, who should be there, and who should not be there. These are things that need to be thought about very, very carefully. Many of your viewers are familiar with the Burma Peace Index, and it has on it a lot of the past agreements that were signed between the military and ethnic armed groups in the country. There's like 20 different agreements that a paper copy is. Most of them are very short. And I used to use these in a class that I taught on peace processes. And I distributed all of them to people in the room. And each of those items that people can go look up, they're all from Myanmar, had different names on them. Some of them were called Peace Accord, very grandly titled. But I analyze it and see what was actually in the document. And in almost all cases, they were talking about talks. They weren't even to the stage of ceasefire yet. They were talking about talks. And we can say that is the place we are in today. People are talking about talks, and they're not really sure whether they want to go forward with them. That's a stage of talking about talks.
Yeah, the thing about who is coming to the tables and what kinds of arrangement they like talking about, this is quite an important primary step, I believe.
Very
Right now
important.
and I think the resistance side is not ready to go there, I believe. And because the resistance side has a precondition already, like there are like 6 points, but mostly I think the most important part will be like transitional justice, like the military will be accountable for all the action they done. And then the military need to get rid of the politics system. This is a key idea that the NUGs and other ethnic groups collectively announced that this is a precondition. But we don't know what will happen next in the coming months and years. But still, yes, and to relate with the blood debts. So some people think that as a retaliation, revenge, and vengeance. But for some activists and political actors, they define this as a transitional justice. So there is something wrong to the community, and there need to be some kinds of accountability for the military. So this kinds of ideas is there, and that is like set already. There is nothing to discuss more. It's already complex solutions. So something like that. This is like on principle. On reality, that might be interest and like elite power sharing. That's a different scenario. But on principally, there is the opposition side say this is the thing that we need, and then we cannot negotiate anything further from these preconditions. So something like a lot of people think for this to get these terms, we cannot get from the table. We got to push more power, more pressure to military. This is the general idea of the resistance side. So like, do you think in the coming months or coming year, the resistance side should also, because right now the actually the Naypyidaw is more active on like invitation to peace table, something like that. But the resistance side is more like from the defensive side. Like we want peace, but on this term. So they are trying to say international stakeholder that we are not closing the negotiation, but with these terms only. So this is the current scenario. So the resistance side, do the resistance side need to rethink about the precondition or like the like pre-talk stage, like or I don't know, anything we should consider?
Well, both sides will probably have some demands that are absolutely unacceptable to the other side. For example, the military may say, put down your arms, then we can talk. This is frequently, in many countries, the beginning point for the government to talk to a rebel group. Put down your arms and then we'll talk. The rebels say, no way. And so things stop there until both sides agree we've got issues, but let's talk. These are things that we're going to have demands, but the demands don't get into the way of talking. So the first talks usually start without preconditions, except for safety guarantees for the people who are going to talk. Those are normal. But if there are demands, you do all of this before we will talk, is guaranteed that you're not going to get the talks for a while. It doesn't mean you have to sacrifice those demands to talk. You say, well, we have these demands, but we're willing to meet with you without a condition. And who meets? And how unified are they? So that, I think, is the big question for the opposition. I mean, we can all speculate on who won't be at the table. Like, do you see the UWSA going? The current state of the situation in the country with the chaos fits their business model perfectly. They don't have an interest in this. They're not going to be at the table to start off with. Just not going to be there. We know that. I think it's a rational decision by the actors not to include them. But anybody else who's not included, this is going to be what is the cost of that going to be? And you need to know that cost going into it. So the decision of how unified are people, what are we seeking to negotiate for, what are we willing to give? Because there is going to be compromise. Everybody loves the term compromise as long as it's the other person's term to compromise. Otherwise, we don't like the term compromise at all. And it has to be unified on that. It has to be unified. So, yeah, I see becoming unified, understanding what your negotiating points are, and who's going to be at the table are the key issues for the opposition right now.